If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you do understand will confuse you. In all of these 9 areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Anywhere on the planet, minute by minute, day by day, all of the time, all of the time, all of the time.
Alrighty, let me say good morning. Let me say grand rising, hotep, whatever greeting that you would like to have. Welcome to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. We hope to have a good show for you today with your questions and, of course, the comments that Mr. Fuller will make. All things are related to the wonderful book that he will talk about extensively during the show, and that is the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. And he will talk about it and give reference to a lot of things in the book throughout today's programming. If you have a question or VGQ, dial this number, 516-453-9921. Be sure, if you have a question or comment, to depress the number 1 button and you will get in line. I'm going to ask, ma'am, I'm going to ask, sir, please make your questions short and to the point so that Mr. Fuller can fully understand what you are saying and to answer it appropriately. I've had some things said that some people are so analytical and asking questions and are so long that it makes it difficult to follow what they are saying. So please, ma'am, please, sir, just make it sweet, just like we're having a conversation now. Make it sweet, short and sweet, to the point so we can get it done. You can also Gmail me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com. And as I usually say, your question will probably not be read today, but at some time on a different show or broadcast, it will be read. Keep in mind that we have stacks of Gmails, and I will try to get to them as quickly as I can and get an appropriate answer for you. Chat room is open, and there are interesting chats on there. My chat room people are very intelligent. They know when certain people get on that they call them trolls, and they don't take the bait, and I am so happy that they don't do that. But Grand Rising to Be Good One, and Morpheus is in there. A Sankofa 777 is there, and there will be others that are in, and they keep a lively conversation going. You're welcome to join them, and occasionally I will read a comment from the Gmail, but normally not necessarily, but sometimes it is. Okay, with that being said, let me go to the Gmail. I believe I did have. There we go. This is from Mr. Weston. He says this: Dear Mr. Fuller, unfortunately, some of your supporters like to quote you and talk day and night about white supremacy this, white supremacy that. So much so that it is infuriating some like Judge Joe Brown. Yes, the now retired TV judge who pushed back this week on his weekly podcast. Not against you, Mr. Fuller, or the code, but against those who just want to talk about it but not do anything about it. He said that white supremacy is nothing more than adversity, the same type of adversity that a man faced in the old age when we had to face wild predators who wanted to tear us limb from limb and eat us. But we conquered it, and now we rule the world. He concluded by asking those who want to complain about white supremacy day and night, but do nothing about it, quote, what the F is wrong with you that you won't even try to conquer your adversity, end of quote. In this case, white supremacy. So I found that interesting. He said that because it was just a more blunt way of saying what you always say, Mr. Fuller, in terms of how our focus should be on eliminating the system of white supremacy so that we can breathe and live normal lives. My VGQ, that was from Darrell. Good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
This Gmail was from Darrell quoting something that he heard from the TV Judge Joe Brown. Are you familiar with Judge Joe Brown?
I have in the past. I don't have much time to look at a lot of things, but I have seen his program on a number of occasions when he first came on the air.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't see this particular program that Mr. Darrell was referring to, but as you have written this book and as you see things that are going on from day to day, why isn't that black people are not really or lose focus on what the problem is, in your opinion?
Well, why is it that black people lose focus on what the problem is?
Yeah, white supremacy.
That's the question?
Yes, sir.
I don't know. They have major, according to the code, it comes down to, in answer to the question, in my opinion and from observation, black people's priorities, for one thing, is not racism. I don't see the evidence of that at all for most black people. They don't wake up in the morning and go to bed at night thinking about racism as a priority. They might think about it during the day. They might think about it every day. But that's not the priority that black people have. I have observed, and I could be in error, and people can correct me if I am, because I like to be corrected, because codification is all about the truth. So the question is, what is black people's priority throughout the world, for the most part, day by day? And according to what I have written, black people's priority is, from what I see, impressing other black people. Black people have that in mind more than anything, even when they don't look at it that way. I think the average black person would, if hearing me say that, would say, wait a minute, my priority is impressing other black people? That's not my priority. My priority is to realize my ambitions and my full potential, et cetera, et cetera. But when you actually look at what black people do and the amount of time and money and energy they spend, black people just want to look up other black people and do whatever they can to impress other black people. They're not trying to impress anyone but other black people. I mean, and then that seems to be the essence of life itself. Boy, I mean, everybody's, all these black people now are talking about me. I wrote a song, or I showed them my diamond ring, or I bought a new car, or all of my friends and associates who are usually black, I mean, they pay attention to me now. When I was going to school, nobody paid attention to me. And now that I am a quote-unquote success of some type, they all pay attention to me. And I'm happy. The world is beautiful. Life is beautiful. There are no such thing as problems. Why? Because I'm squared away. And what I mean by squared away is I not only have fun, glory, and material things, but I have the attention of a whole bunch of black people, some of whom I know
and some of whom I don't know. And the average black person is pretty satisfied with that. In every tribe, the average person in that tribe is trying to impress other members of what? The tribe. It doesn't go any further than that. If I can strut around, in the tribal circle and whatnot, and all eyes on me, and I'm the pride of the tribe, and it's the same way with gangs. It's the same way with sororities, fraternities. What do my frat brothers think of me? Outside of that, I don't care what the world thinks about anything. It ain't no other world. It's just me and my frat brothers, or me and my sisters in this sorority, or me and my little church group. They all look at me. They're all waiting on me to come into the church, see what I'm wearing, wondering what I'm going to say today when I stand up, wonder how I'm going to sing that song in the choir. And beyond that, there's absolutely little or no interest at all in what's going on. Now compare that to the white supremacists, who, in the front of their minds or the back of their minds, they wake up every morning and go to bed every night thinking of, I'm going to be the supreme person based on being white on this planet. And even in outer space, if I can reach any dark skin, any purple people out there, any people of color, I'm going to conquer them and put them under my thumb. That is my claim to fame. That is the thing that gives me fun, glory, and material comfort. And it has been somewhat successful, if not the most successful enterprise in recorded history. And as a white person, I am obligated to think that way and act that way, either directly or indirectly. Maybe it won't show on the surface, but just being white and being supreme over the dark people of the entire universe. That's my priority. While that black person is just strutting around talking about, I got some new beads around my neck, and I want everybody in the tribe to respect my beads.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk about black massacres. Most of us don't know a whole lot of them. I think on this program, Mr. Fuller, since you were born in, I think it was Muskogee, Oklahoma, I think a question was asked to you about what do you remember about the Tulsa race riots, but there have been others all across this corporation called the United States. I'm looking at a screen now that has several of them. But a question came up in the chat room. It says, could you ask Mr. Fuller, did he see the testimony of 3 people who are living? One is 107, another one is 106, and I think all were 100 years old, who testified about the Tulsa riot experience. And I did see some of that, and some of them are still hurting. Did you see the documentary about that, Mr. Fuller?
I did.
What is your VGQ on that, and your memories as you were told as you were coming up about the Tulsa race riots?
Very little was told. It was like it was just a slight blip on black history, just a passing thing, like, well, an incident that, of note, and that's it. And that's the way I heard about it when I was in elementary school and high school, I think. And I was just 60 miles. I was born 60 miles and spent my first 19, 20 years in Muskogee, Oklahoma,
Muskogee,
which is roughly 60 miles from Tulsa. But no one talked about the Tulsa massacre. I mean, except just, in passing. Oh, yeah, that was a riot over there back in, 1921. But it's all, that was in the past. And that was it. No details, no nothing. It was quite a thing. And they said, well, some of the people from Muskogee went over there. They, armed groups of black people, Negroes, who were called colored people at that time, about 4 carloads from Muskogee went over to help out. I mean, and bolstered up the ranks of armed resistance to what was going on. I don't know, and other than that, that's the only details that involved Muskogee that I heard about. Some of the people who knew that was going on, and I think about 3 carloads went over. People with shotguns and rifles. Some of them were veterans of World War I, left Muskogee and went over. And I don't know what their participation was, whether or not they were effective in doing whatever they went over to do, presumably to help out, defend the Greenwood area against what was going on. But as far as people talking about it, no one mentioned it in high school, grade school. It just wasn't mentioned. Definitely nothing in the books and whatnot about it. It was in black newspapers at the time, I understand. Of course, I was born in 1929. The incident happened in 1921. But for some reason, it just wasn't mentioned. It was like hush-hush. And people just kind of brushed it off as, I don't want to talk about it. Not in a hardcore way, but just, well, it happened, and so we move on. People, for the most part, didn't like to talk about things that they thought they couldn't do anything about. That would apply to just about everything. I mean, when I was very young, people would take one glance at something that was going on, some incident, and say, now what can I do about that? And after 2 or 3 minutes thought, they would say, well, I don't think I can do anything about that. And so no point in talking about it. You talk about things you can do something about if it's a problem. And that was kind of like the basic attitude toward everything, including the Tulsa Massacre.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I bring that up again. One of the chat room people, Be Good One, had made mention of it, and I did see that, and I'm happy to hear that you did watch the television presentation on that. And I bring that up because hopefully during this time, I'll bring up we will address or have you address the 1619 Project by Dr. Nicole Hannah Jones. 1619 Project. And for those of you who are listening, you may want to take a look at that so that when we get to that, if we are able to get to that, you'll have some knowledge of what's been going on. You think the election was a big lie. Anyway, let's go here. Let's go to the phone lines quickly, and we have Darnell. Darnell, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and what is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Good morning, sir.
My question for you, Mr. Fuller, today is, I was wondering why on the show and in your book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a Compensatory Counter-Racist Code, Revised Expanded Edition, you always stress having a code for the victims of racism. Thank you.
Why did I always stress having a code for victims of racism?
Yes, sir.
Because the racists have a code for supporting racism. And that's why it's so successful. Anything that's successful is codified. That's why you see the word code when you talk about the plumbing code or a bar code, electrical codes, the barcode that you see on products that you get from the grocery store. It's very efficient, very efficient. It used to be in the old days when I was coming up, it had a price tag on it, and when the clerk behind the counter had to look at the price tag that would be on the item itself, 25 cents, 35 cents, wouldn't. And sometimes they put something that's got to be weighed on a scale that was right there by the cash register, and then they would tell you how much that was, and did you want it or not, or take it back because it weighed a little too much or something. And so someone came up with say, hey, this is too slow and burdensome, and we have the technology, so let's have what we call a barcode, where you just swipe it across something, and everything is registered, and you keep track of everything. You know how much of everything you got. Very, very, very efficient. And then you have a zip code for mailing things. Someone came up with that idea. That didn't always exist. You had to have people look at a number and be able to remember where that goes and where this goes and where that goes. You had to learn something called a scheme in the post office. I think that was associated with that type of thing at the time. I don't know all the details of it. I did work at the post office for a little while myself, and I know that they had codes then of addresses, but you had to know street numbers, etc. I don't know if that's still the same case.
Yes, it is.
It is?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but even then, you had something called a zip code, and you have it now, and it's a very efficient system. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. They would have gotten rid of it. They would have dumped that a long time ago. But they found out that things that are codified, meaning every time you do it, it works. That's all a code is. Every time you do it, it works, and it works efficiently. Then you stick with it. And in answer to the question, the white supremacists came up with an idea of dominating and mistreating all of the non-white people on the planet that they could grab or be associated with in some way and conquer them in all 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. And they say, if you can do that, you'll have a system called white supremacy, because everybody who's white will be the beneficiaries of that system, and everybody who is non-white would suffer from it. And it was turned out to be the most powerful political and religious idea in modern recorded history. And so they put it into practice, and it became codified. They said, we've got to have a code. Now, every white person will do this and do that and do the other. And then there were some things that no white person will do or say at any time, because it will be against the white code. The non-white people of the planet had nothing like that. No defense against it either. That's why it became so powerful. No religious or political system has ever been in recorded history more powerful than that system called the system of white supremacy, and it is run by a code. In answer to the question, black people haven't even attempted to build a code. The closest thing we have come to a code is just every now and then we come up with slogans. The latest one is Black Lives Matter. Before then, some years ago, we had We Shall Overcome, Before then, we had a number of other slogans. But slogans are effective. But slogans, like I've said many times here on air, slogans are like titles of books. But when you turn the pages in the book are all empty. So slogans have to be backed up with codified behavior, meaning things that you do, things that you don't do, in order to do what? Successful at whatever you're trying to do. Everything that is successful is codified.
Reminds me of what James Brown said. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, but you got to back that up.
I mean, the slogans go on, and I am a man. That was a slogan. Over and over again. I'm a man. 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 And the white supremacists said, not according to my code, you're nothing. You might be something to each other, but you're nothing to me. I'm white. You're black. It's impossible for you to be a man. Only one man in the house, and he's white.
Thank you, Darnell, from Houston. Rather, from Pennsylvania. Sorry, Darnell. Got that right. Okay, let's do this. Remember, when you call in, to please give your name to the call screener so that I can properly identify you. I'm going to take a station break a little bit early. You are listening to the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. here on Blog Talk Radio, and we thank you for doing that, the Counter-Racist Code Show. He's here to speak about his book, which will be coming up in about 20 minutes, and to answer your questions. And if you have any questions or comments, call this number, 516-453-9921. And when you do that, please, sir, be sure to make your questions concise, not too confusing, but just to the point so that Mr. Fuller can address your question or your concern. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Chat room is available, and you can join the conversations that are there, and occasionally I will read some of the chats that are going on. All righty. If I can get this up here. Let's do this here. Okay, Mr. Fuller, are you familiar with the project that's going on right now? It's been going on for a while, called the 1619 Project.
I have heard about it. I would like to be familiar with it.
Okay, I'll just give you a little background. The 1619 Project is a long-form journalism project developed by Dr. Nicole Hannah-Jones, writers from the New York Times and the New York Times Magazine, which, quote, aims to reframe the country's history by placing the consequences of slavery and the contributions of black Americans at the very center of the United States national narrative, end of quote. The project was first published in the New York Times Magazine in August of 2019 for the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first enslaved Africans in the English colony of Virginia. The project later included a broadsheet article, live events, and podcast. The project has sparked severe criticism and debate among prominent historians and political commentators. In a letter published in the New York Times in December 2019, historians Gordon Wood, James McPherson, Sean Wilentz, Victoria Bynum, and James Oakes expressed, quote, strong reservations, end of quote, about the project and requested factual corrections accusing the project of putting ideology before historical understanding. And in response, Jake Silverstein, the editor of the New York Times Magazine, defended and declined to issue corrections. In March 2020, the Times issued a clarification, end quote, modifying one of the passages that had sparked controversy. And on May the 4th, 2020, the Pulitzer Prize Board announced the award of the 2020 Pulitzer Prize for commentary to project creator Nicole Hannah-Jones for her introductory essay to the 1619 Project. The article goes on and on. You can get that article from Wikipedia. There are other articles that address this. Just recently, I believe the University of North Carolina had offered tenure to Dr. Hannah-Jones, but because she wrote this, she was pressured, or the university was pressured by prominent people that you know all over this country that want to keep the narrative alive and not this truth, even though it may not necessarily be in chronological order. That part is from me, but they want to the lie that Christopher Columbus discovered America and so forth and all that, which supports all these systems that Mr. Fuller you speak about. It directly supports that and gives it the illegal system of racism and white supremacy, and gives them reason to keep it alive and going in every area of people activity that you have mentioned. They don't want this truth out to be exposed, because the bottom line is eventually reparations would have to be addressed and paid, because those slaves did not get paid for the work that they have done in this country. Anyway, it goes on and on and on, and they are still fighting against that and do not want it. Want this in the history books and so forth. The state of Texas is really vehemently against the 1619 Project. That's a little bit in a nutshell, Mr. Fuller, of what this project has done and opened up the eyes of some people. A lot of black people may not be familiar with this, but this is what is going on, and there's been such and such added on to that. But that is basic, and I mean basic a little bit, information about the 1619 Project. So I'm glad, Mr. Fuller, that you have heard about that. Do you plan on reading more about this or what?
Sure. If I get a copy of it, I would most certainly take it seriously and look into it with the time that I have to spare. I have so many things I'm trying to catch up with and read. I'm running all the time trying to keep up with things. Mm-hmm. But when I heard about it, let's see now, as of May the 24th, I made some notes here that I put this note under Area 2 of the textbook for victims of white supremacy, education. And here's the statement that I made, and I made this up as a tentative thing, but I think it expresses exactly what my view is of all this controversy about the statutes and what should be in the school books and what should be taken out and what statutes should be taken down and what statutes should be put up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just trying to cut to the chase like I have a duty to do and try to codify the whole matter. Mm-hmm. And so I put down a note here. I have it here, and I'm reading it. It's just some tentative notes that I made. And I have a date line of May the 24th. That's when I wrote this year. And I have on required textbooks. That's the subject of my note. On required textbooks. and I say that in every house, school, library, etc., in the known universe, I'm going to go back and say that again. In every house, school, library, etc., in the known universe, there should be 2 books. Now, these books have yet to be written as far as I know. But there should be 2 books in every house, every school, every library, etc., in the known universe. I'm talking about all over the world. Every house. Particularly, specifically, every house of every non-white person, for sure. But in order to set the record straight and for everybody to be on the same page and for everybody to understand, that's why my recommendation, codified recommendation, and I'm saying everybody should be trying to contribute to this writing of this book, including me. And that would be 2 books. You would have them there just like these are universal books. I mean, that everybody required reading in every school, every forum, every governmental circle, every whatever you got where people interact with people. And so I gave tentative titles to the 2 books that I recommend. The title of the first book would be The Complete Historical Record of the System of White Supremacy. That's just a recommended title. The Complete Historical Record of the System of White Supremacy. Not starting with any particular year like 1619 and Columbus and all of that. I'm talking about the complete historical record of the system of white supremacy worldwide, which would include everything, every type of disorder, every type of incident, every lynching, everything that white people and black people have done on every occasion. Some of it constructive, most of it non-constructive in their interactions with each other. Since the beginning of the system of white supremacy. That would be the first book. Next to that book would be, and this is a suggested title, The Complete Codes for Replacing the System of White Supremacy with Universal Man and Universal Woman, meaning everything that everybody should be doing to bring about the establishment of Universal Man and Universal Woman. And they will do this, first of all, by replacing the system that is now in place called the system of white supremacy. And I'll repeat that title again. This is just a suggested title, compensatory suggested title. The Complete Codes, that means all of the codes, everything that works, that will best help to replace the system of white supremacy with Universal Man and Universal Woman. And, of course, if you have Universal Man and Universal Woman, you don't have any non-justice going on anywhere on the planet. Nowhere. Particularly non-justice based on color. But you can't have justice of any kind, because there's just one kind of justice, really, without getting rid of the system of white supremacy, which is in the way of justice being produced among the people of the known universe. And what we need is something we don't have at all. And that's anyone who is qualified to say truthfully that he or she is a universal man or universal woman. Because in order to have universal man and universal woman, according to the code and logic, you can't have anybody being mistreated. And you're going to have everybody participating in the system of mistreatment as long as you have the system of white supremacy. So the two recommended books that I'm saying, see, they're just, with this, what do you call it, 1016?
No, 1619.
1619 project. People are talking about that's controversial. No, we need something far more grandiose than that. I mean, this is something to build on, whatever it is. But I'm saying in every house, in every school, in every library, in every village, I mean villages where people are still barefoot, it will be, you will find, even in a tattered state, in every one of these settlements, places that are very isolated, primitive places, you will find the books called The Complete Historical Record of the System of White Supremacy, and the second book will be basically the complete codes for what to do about it.
Okay.
That should be everywhere right now, right as we speak right now in 2021. Those two books with the participants, hopefully I will be one of them, and every writer that writes anything about race, racism, or counter-racism, and every record that exists everywhere. I mean, any records you can find in Egypt that touch upon racism, any records you could find in Timbuktu, in the archives there, or anything that they can find in so-called Middle East that deals with white supremacy in color, and the whole record of everything that happened, every incident that happened of lynching, and every black person that came up under so-called apartheid, that will be in the book, and their experiences and all like that. I mean, these are super books now. I mean,
yes.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many pages you would have to cover, but it might be quite a few. But the complete history of the system of white supremacy, and the second book would be what each individual person can do about it according to a code on a day-to-day basis, wherever he or she happen to be.
All righty. Let's do this then. Let's go to Maryland, and we have Nicole. Nicole, you are on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, Mr. Bobby.
Good morning.
Okay, I have a two-part statement short, and then I have a question. Okay, I want to speak about Become a Army of One, Mr. Fuller's last week conversation. The baby boomers shook up things, however, only select a few, as yourself, Mr. Fuller, create platforms to think on how to change the ink on white supremacy. You recall you said we do not have to agree with everything you say. I'm grateful for that because as my age bracket, we was always taught to respect your elders. However, if your elders is being disrespectful, then you have the right to address that. I'm not saying that you're being disrespectful. Only thing I'm saying is about reparation. When you had said a while back that we don't need reparation, even if people in our generation couldn't handle money being given out through reparation, for reparation to at least address issues in our in our communities by creating skill-based centers, recreational centers. I think their uses can go somewhere else. And then lastly, I was taught by the Black United Front as an ex-gang member, got into college. However, they taught us action. However, during that intervention of my life, and then as that storyteller generation started dying off, I became attacked through blackballing because I was speaking out on the rezoning of our neighborhoods and how the money that was allocated for community redevelopment was zip codes changed and rezoned to suburban areas to ensure their sustainability. I'm really grateful, Mr. Fuller, that I'm able to chime in on these conversations because as a blackballed person, my sons was kind of the sacrifice of that, and I'm still dealing with that. So instead of giving up, continue to giving me the courage to fight and to stand for what I was taught, and that was, before I even knew about your book, changing the code of how white supremacy affect my neighborhood and my life. And then my question is, how do you deal with being blackballed by your own people that are non-white?
Well, the first thing is you stop using the word blackball. That's,
well, what word would you replace it with?
It's a derogatory term. What's incorrect about blackballs? That word blackball is associated with phalluses and whatnot, and the balls that go with a phallus. And if it's black, that's deadly to the system of white supremacy. And that's why it's considered something. What does the word blackball mean? It means something that's harmful. So watch how the words dark and black are used in the English language. The white supremacists, that's a part of their code. And you don't want to support that. Just look up the word blackball and see what it means, and then find other words to use to say what you mean by the word blackball. Now, what does the word blackball mean when you say you have been blackballed? You just said it. Isn't that correct? Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Nicole, go ahead.
I'm sorry that I said blackball in my situation, meaning that
yes,
my
meaning
son was.
What does the word blackball mean?
I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess I just it's just a term that I heard that was used once you are kind of extracted to a certain degree from the
look up
community.
the term. I haven't even looked up the term blackball, but the minute I hear black and dark in any context, like the Washington Post newspaper says, democracy dies in darkness. That's on the copy of every paper that goes out every day. Right there.
Okay, I see. Respectfully, so I see.
Yes,
I see what you're saying.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because I want the entire world to start paying attention to how the word dark, darkness, and the word black is used. I'm not the first person to say this. Many people have been saying this for decades. And be careful of how you use it, because the white supremacists always use it to mean something to be avoided, something that's poisonous, something that's deadly, something that should be done away with. Drive away the darkness. Bring in the light. These are ways of supporting the system of white supremacy. So just look up the word and then find other words to say what you want to say. Now, in the other part of your, I guess, you are being condemned, I guess, or criticized for doing what?
For doing, they was rezoning our neighborhood, and I went to some of the meetings, and like you said last week, sometimes you could pick up a book. Like I would take a math book or whatever and knew the equations that they were speaking of on different things. So I was always speaking against how they was taking money out of the old urban communities or the old black communities, non-white communities, and changing the zip codes and sending the money up to suburban areas. And I got condemned for that.
And who were the people who were condemning you?
The politicians in the neighborhood, the police force.
Politicians meaning whom? Were they white or non-white?
They was white and non-white.
Okay. Well, then the white people who are condemning you to start asking questions. Is this what they are doing, and what is supposed to be the constructive result? And you address it to the white people. You don't have to pay any attention to the black people at all.
Okay.
See, the code says the black people don't make that decision. You're talking about zoning and anything of any significance that has to do with black people. Black people don't make decisions about black people. In the system of white supremacy, white people make decisions about black people.
Well,
directly and indirectly. Otherwise, there'd be no such thing as white supremacy. So you can just address all of the white people. You don't have to address the black people at all, except to say they said what they said. But these are fellow prisoners. So it doesn't make any difference what they say about anything anyway.
I got you.
Okay.
I don't care what kind of title they got. I don't care where they're located and all like that. Black people don't have anything to say about anything in the system of white supremacy that it better be okayed by somebody white. Otherwise, Neely Fuller has been telling lies the whole time he's been talking. Because when I say white supremacy, that's exactly what I mean. And it's either the truth or false. The white supremacists make the decisions about black people or they don't. That's either true or false.
All righty. Nicole, thank you for your call. Thank you from Maryland, and don't be a stranger. Thank you very much. Mr. Fuller, we have about 6 minutes before the hour is concluded, and I'm going to give you some of this time to speak about this book, this code book that you have written. Go ahead, Mr. Fuller, please.
Yes. My book is just one of the main books that I recommend that's written, that's addressed to counter racism, because this program started off talking about what to do. One of the callers said, that a lot of talk has been done about what the situation is, how awful it is, Mr. Floyd and the knee on his neck and all of the black people who have perished. Black people have perished by the zillions, probably. We don't know how many black people have died and are dying and will continue to die as long as the system of white supremacy exists. I don't think there's any record that will show the accurate number. So that goes with the territory. That will continue, no matter how much talk is done, until some talk starts doing and some action starts happening that has an effect on replacing the system of white supremacy with justice. Because so far, very little effect has any action, any speech, any writings had on the efficiency of the system of white supremacy, which here in 2021 is still the most powerful political system and the most powerful religion of any systems among people of the known universe ever produced in recorded history. And so I have tried to write a book that's designed to help the individual person to start the process in earnest of codifying, having a counter code to the white code that keeps the efficiency of the system of white supremacy going, and ultimately, as fast as we possibly can, tomorrow or this minute, if we can possibly do it, replace the system of white supremacy with what should have been done in the first place, and that is have a system of justice throughout the entire planet called Earth, meaning guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most always gets the most constructive help. And that would be through, presumably, something called universal man and universal woman. Not racist man, racist woman, which is what you have now running everything, and their victims. So nothing is the way that it ought to be anywhere on planet Earth. But you can't correct anything among people on any significant scale without first getting rid of the system of white supremacy. I'm trying to write a code book because the white supremacists have their code, and we need a counter code according to logic in order to counter a code that's already in place. We've never had one. We should be working on it and address it to the individual person, because if you give power to the individual person, you automatically give power to all persons. That's the equation. The white supremacists understand that. So I've tried to write a textbook for victims of white supremacy. That's a code for what to do and what not to do in all areas of activity each and every day that you're on the planet. That will counter the white code, the glue that holds the system of white supremacy together. We've never had one. We've never even attempted to have one. We need one. I've tried to start. The infancy is in its infant stage of a code, hopefully. And hopefully, to the extent that it can, do the job. But to the extent that it doesn't, everybody should be trying to come up with a code for everything that you do and say. That's the way to do it. A code for everything that you do and say. Not the person next door across the street. You write it for yourself first, because that's how I started. And then you spread it based on what works and what doesn't work. And the things you come up with that you think will work, you just put it out there as something you think will work. That's how a code is written. And a code is just something that works. That's all it is. You can get it by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com. And my writings in the form of a textbook for victims of white supremacy will come up on the screen. 3 volumes there. It's all really one book. And the first book is the infancy of the revised expanded edition of the 1984 edition. Some people like the 1984 edition. Some people like all 3 volumes. And some people just like the revised expanded. But you get what you want. And the books are described as what's in the books at that website, producejustice.com.
All righty, producejustice.com. And all the books, according to Robert, and Moon Pie is doing the job today. Thank you, Moon Pie, for making everything run smooth. And by the way, thank you for Sharon, who covered for you during your loss. We send our condolences out to you, but thank you anyway. But Robert had mentioned that all the books are in, Mr. Fuller, and from what I understand, they're going well. And from the Gmails and emails that I get on my other sites, a lot of people are hungry for what you have written, which in my opinion is a very, very good thing. And I'm seeing young people are doing that because they're tired of being lied to and not accepting what they've been taught in the schools and so forth, because it's been a big lie. Somebody had mentioned to me that they thought that a certain person who said that he won the election, I guess they're claiming that as the big lie. Well, the 1619 Project and others, they have begun to say that it's even a bigger lie, and that lie justifies justifies the illegal system of white supremacy races, and they want to keep the narrative the same. So thank you for your book, and thank you for the contribution, and thank you people that have purchased the book. Well, that concludes the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. If you have to go, hopefully we will see you next week. But for those who are going to stay tuned for another hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. that will commence in 7 seconds. All righty. Thank you. Thank you very much for tuning in to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. To get in contact with the show, just simply dial, or whatever you do anymore, 516-453-9921, and be sure to depress the number 1 button so that you can get in line to be heard. You can also email me at the numero 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. It will not be read today, but at some point in time, I will read that. Chat room is alive and popping. Some very good thought that is going on in the chat room. Thank you for that, by the way. Special hello to JJ from England. Thank you, but Constructive 1 is in there, and Produce 21, Morpheus, thank you. Yes, Be Good 1, A. Sankofa, Al Freedom is there, and so many others. Beautiful words, and thank you for not taking the bait from the trolls that get on that side and try to mess your thoughts up, but thank you for that. Okay, let's get on with the show. This is the projected order. It may not be exactly, but Tony from The Rock, I got you down in here. David, we're going to get to you in Fort Worth, and Swa in L.A. Hopefully we will get to you, but let's do this. This comes from Mr. Barrington in England. He entitled it Gutter Sex, Mr. Fuller. He said, recently in England, a white woman was captured on video racially abusing a black male nightclub bouncer, calling him the N-word, etc. The video was posted on Instagram in order to identify and arrest this woman. The white woman also posted on Instagram that she is not a racist because she works with black people, and in the past she has dated several black males. Mr. Fuller, could you please talk about the dangerous practice of sex between whites and blacks and how this strengthens the system of white supremacy? Thank you, Mr. Anthony McKinn in England.
Well, sexual intercourse is what gives strength to the system of white supremacy if it's between a white person and a non-white person because of the power dynamic. Now, what do I mean by the power dynamic, so people don't get confused about that? It's like a prison system, which is what the white supremacist system is. The system of white supremacy, in general terms, and in terms that many people can probably understand, just envision in your mind a world prison, that the whole planet is a prison camp. And in this prison camp, all of the people who are classified as non-white are prisoners of war. And the people who are classified as white are the masters of the prison. They are the prison commandants. They are the prison wardens, racist man and racist woman. All of the white people on the planet who believe in and who practice white supremacy and participate in the system of white supremacy are the prison masters. So think of the entire planet as being a prison camp for non-white people, people of color. Now, in a prison camp, what do you see? You see prisoners, and you see prison masters. And what do the prisoners in a prison camp do? They mostly just mill around doing large quantities of nothing until motivated to do small quantities or large quantities of something by the prison masters. So in a prison camp, you also, in the eighth area of activity, have sex going on, sexual intercourse of some type in a prison camp, or something dealing with sexuality. Okay? So, in the system of white supremacy, which is a prison system, when a white person has sexual intercourse with a non-white person in the prison camp of white supremacy, it automatically means that the prisoner of war, which is the non-white person, is being sexually abused. Why? Because they are not equal. The prison master in a POW camp, prisoner of war camp, is not the equal to the prisoner in that setting. So if the prison master goes into the jail cell of a prisoner, has sexual intercourse, and then walks out and leaves the prisoner there, which is where the prisoner is still a prisoner. The prison hasn't been eliminated. The prisoner as a prisoner isn't freed by sexual intercourse. Just because a captain of a slave ship has sexual intercourse with one of the slaves on the slave ship, as was depicted in the movie Roots, there was a scene, I understand, where the captain of the ship said he wanted what? A belly warmer. Go down there and bring one of those black wenches up here, as they called them in those days, and clean her up, because I know she's filthy. Put some salt water on her and whatnot, and spray some type of perfume or whatever you got, and send her up here to me naked. And so they did that. It was kind of depicted in the movie, I understand, if I recall correctly, Roots, one of the early episodes, where the captain said, send me a belly warmer. Okay, so the non-white people of this planet in 2021, who say all of the black people who have sexual intercourse with white people are belly warmers. It hasn't changed. Why? Because the status of being prisoners for the non-white people has not changed. You still have the system of white supremacy in place. If there were no such thing as white supremacy and never been invented, it would just be boy meets girl, even Steven. But it's not that way. So the prisoner is being violated. The non-white person who has sexual intercourse with a white person, even if they say they love each other, they you know, the prison masters, slave masters said, I got slaves, but, Sally Hemings, send her up here. I mean, she's one of my favorite slaves, and I'd rather be with her and be with a whole lot of white people. I understand that's what Mr. Jefferson said. I mentioned somebody named Sally Hemings. I understand that Thomas Jefferson had a slave named, if I got it correct, Sally Hemings. That was her name. But he took Sally with him to France, and he wouldn't take. So a lot of white women probably wanted to go to France, but no, he took a slave with him because that was one of his favorites for sexual intercourse purposes, and he had babies. The slave female, Sally Hemings, had babies by Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers here in the Northwestern Hemisphere. But she was still a slave. Doesn't make any difference if he gave her some of the finest clothes. I mean, because he didn't want to take a filthy slave to France with him, I presume. And I understand that she was comfortable. But there are slaves that are comfortable. There are slaves in the big house that the master has sexual intercourse with who are reasonably comfortable, or a lot more comfortable than a lot of white people. But they are slaves. And that is sexual abuse and it's child abuse, because every prisoner of war is a child. A child how? By numerical numbers? You know, you got a 50-year-old and you say that's a child? Yes. Why? Because you're in a childlike state if you're a prisoner of war. You got to beg for everything. Beg whom? Master. In every area of activity. Your economics, your education, your entertainment, your labor, your law, your politics, your religion, and sex. You have no command over that as a prisoner of war. And, of course, war, the last area of activity, you're a prisoner of war. I hope I've explained it.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. And that was from Mr. McKeon and the concept called England. Let's go to the Rock, Little Rock. Okay, Tough Tony is in. Tony, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question?
Good morning. I looked up the late Frances Cress Welsing, who I used to listen to for years prior to her passing. And Google has described her as a black supremacist. Now, I know that is incorrect, and I just want to hear Mr. Fuller elaborate on that a little bit. And plus, just for the listeners, I want to share that I've been listening to Neely Fuller and following his suggestions as far as extracting messages out of different entertainment programs. One that we're watching now is very entertaining. It's the Godfather of Harlem. And also I want to find out if the Exterminating All the Brutes, documentary that we've been watching on HBO also relates to what you all were talking about to 1619. And that is my question, or those are my questions. I hope that's clear enough. And thanks for your comments in advance.
All righty, Mr. Fuller.
I hear some noise in the background.
Tony, there's something in the background.
But okay. Yeah, I was listening to the radio on the computer.
Oh, okay.
I just muted it.
Okay.
Yes. Now, if I understand, I was asked to make a remark about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing being called a black supremacist.
Yes, sir. I think that would probably confuse us a lot.
Oh, well, I want to address, because the code doesn't allow me to address things in that manner, but the code, what I have written about black supremacy in the textbook for victims of white supremacy, there's no such thing as black supremacy. So Dr. Frances Cress Welsing or no other black person can be a black supremacist. That's impossible. You can't have black supremacy and white supremacy in the same universe at the same time, not according to compensatory counter-racist logic. That's impossible. So anybody who called any non-white person or any person, period, a black supremacist is not telling the truth.
Yes,
because
sir.
there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of a black person anywhere in the known universe being supreme in the system of white supremacy. Supreme over white people. It just doesn't exist. So calling anybody a black supremacist in the system of white supremacy is not true. You always go with the truth. There's no evidence of that. Nowhere. That's not going to happen in the system of white supremacy. And where it appears to be something like that, it's because the white supremacists approve of it. But that's an appearance. But it's still white supremacy. If the white supremacists have to approve of it, some black person taking a whip and whipping a white person and nobody can do anything about it, you better believe the white supremacists have approved of it. So that's white supremacy. Black people do a lot of things that look like they're in charge of something. A black person is not in charge of nothing in any area of activity in the system of white supremacy. What do you mean by in charge? I mean the master of, the last word, and the first word. And the white supremacists can't do anything about it and chomping at the bit to do something about it, but they can't on account of the black person is supreme. That's not happening nowhere in 2021 in the known universe, period. So it's just not true. Now, the second thing was what?
Well, the messages you say, the racial messages that we extract from movies, for example, one of your favorites, Shawshank Redemption, we've been looking at Godfather of Harlem with History of Bumpy Johnson on Epics, and also Exterminate All the Brutes, which is on HBO, which relates to 1619, which you guys were discussing earlier. And those were just really observations or comments, I suppose. I was kind of wondering if you guys had alluded or had watched any of those or are watching. But I don't want to take up too much time from your show. I just appreciate you taking our call, and we really appreciate what you're attempting to do with the Counter Racist Code. We have the book, and we want to be a part of the solution to eliminating racism and replacing it with a system of justice. I think that is just awesome that we have people that's focusing on that.
Okay, Tony. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you so much. Mr. Fuller, have you seen The Godfather of Harlem?
No, because I've heard of Bumpy Johnson and all like that, but
yes,
just the title alone, Godfather of Harlem,
mm-hmm.
that sounds like that's kind of restricted to me.
Mm-hmm.
What else is new? Black people being in charge of black people at the bottom of the slave ship.
Okay. Tony, again, thank you for your comments, and try to catch that thing on HBO. What was the name of it again, Tony, before I let you go?
Exterminating All the Brutes.
Okay. Exterminating All the Brutes.
Documentary.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tony, for your comments and so forth. Keep on listening, brother. Don't be a stranger. Okay, let's go to David. David, in Fort Worth, you are on with Mr. Fuller. See if I can get you in here. There we go. What is your question, David?
Yes, sir. I have a kind of a general statement first, and then a question to Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And good morning to you, two young men.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Mm-hmm.
Looking over the word Caucasian, and I broke it down as in Cauc-Asian, and I thought about the influence that the Asian demographic group of people has in the United States of America concept. I thought about the money that's being funneled towards their way by way of the toll roads. I know down in Texas, I don't know about anywhere else, but like in Texas, our toll roads, the money that we pay for tolls is going right to the Asian community, to my understanding. Now, I don't have no legal documents saying that, but the research that I did has proven that to be true. So also with the Asian hate law passed so quickly, and the power and global infrastructure, et cetera, that the Asian has influence over these United States concept, if evidence has proven to be that the demographic group of people labeled as Asian is the smartest people on the planet, are we paying attention? Because would it be smart to let the people of the known universe assume that white is the top of the totem pole, while puppeteering everything is the Asian community as a global shadow government with no ridicule as far as people like pointing and picking at them? So I'm asking Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., is it possible that, assuming that, I'm saying that the Asians technology-wise and like even how to do with their population, is it possible that the Asian has been playing second fiddle to the white supremacists so they don't have to fall up under the ridicule of being like pointed at and as a hate group or whatever, but they really controlling the whole global government per se? Is that a possibility?
Not in my opinion, and not according to what I have seen. So-called Asian supremacy doesn't exist in the system of white supremacy, just like black supremacy doesn't exist. No non-white people. You can't have non-white people supreme and white people supreme in the same universe at the same time. You can't have two supremacists. It doesn't compute. So you either have white supremacy or you don't. Everything that I'm saying is predicated on you have a world government, a universal government as far as people is concerned,
right,
called the system of white supremacy. There's no other government on the planet called Earth. All other so-called governments are just imitation governments, or just government in name only, according to what I've written. Now, this is either true or false, what I've written. It's just a matter of what a person wants to accept. Now, in answer to the question, according to what I have written, since the question is being directed to me,
right?
No, it isn't possible to have any kind of color supremacy other than white supremacy during the existence of the system of white supremacy.
Understood.
It's impossible.
Gotcha. I think that
you have
that
white
maybe
supremacy or you don't, and I'm saying you got white supremacy, and that's all. Nobody else is even to be considered. No runner-up, no nothing.
Would it be possible that the Asian community or the powers that be, like my whole like theory on this thing is that the Asians, they playing second fiddle. They don't want the power. They want the white people to be looked at as they are the power source, but in actuality, they are the puppeteers that's pulling the strings and telling the white supremacists or the global government what to do. If you understand what I'm saying, but I get what you're saying too. I appreciate the answer on the call.
Thank you very much, David from Fort Worth. Thank you so much for your call. And hey, don't be a stranger.
Yeah, I want
a stranger. Okay, let's see here. Let's go to Los Angeles, South Central. SWA, you are on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, sir, please.
Morning, Mr. Bobby. Morning, Mr.
Good morning.
Neely Fuller.
Good morning.
My question is, Mr. Neely Fuller, is the system of white supremacy, is it correct to say that it has trained the way that non-white people think, speak, and behave? Is that a form of mind control?
Yes. You can't control people without controlling their minds. So the white supremacists make sure that everything that black people do, for example, is something that the white supremacists approve of, to keep black people weak. For instance, for example, just one example, when black people were plantation slaves, were still slaves, we were just transferred, no such thing as slaves being liberated in the system of white supremacy or emancipated. We were just transferred, scattered all over the place. That's all. Taken off of the plantation. Just walking off the plantation didn't say that you're not still a slave. You're a slave to the system of white supremacy. I don't care where you go or what your job is. All slaves have always had different jobs, different types of jobs, whatever the white supremacists wanted. So, in order to control people, in answer to the question, you have to control their minds. So in every area of activity, the white supremacists said, we're going to see to it that when it comes to economics, what black people think, how they think about money, how they think about time, how they think about energy, how they think about everything associated with economics. What is economics? Economics is how you use time and energy, and that would include money, okay? And that would include material things, but basically how you use your time and energy. So the white supremacists said, we will control how black people use their time and their energy. And when it comes to education, we will control what they know and what they don't know, and what they understand and what they don't understand. We will control all of that worldwide. And when it comes to entertainment, we will decide what type of entertainment we will pay all that big money for, and make sure that it's something that's absolutely stupid, and we'll tear them down, not build them up, not make them stronger, but make them weaker in their entertainment. Black people love being entertained, and they love being entertainers. But we will control all of that in the way that they think about entertainment, and make sure that it's what? Non-constructive. We'll maybe let a few things slip by that have some constructive value, but won't be of any damage to the system of white supremacy. But we'll make sure that the book of what black people do to entertain themselves will be very, very destructive to black people, okay? Their entertainment, the way they entertain them. Black people love entertainment. So we'll see to it we control it and make sure that it's non-constructive, that it's not going to build them up in any meaningful way, not produce constructive results. And then labor, well, sure, we will decide what kind of work they'll do. They're not going to decide that worldwide. Law, we will decide what law is and what justice is in all of our courts. And no matter how many robes we put on them and say that they are judges and all like that, we will decide what the law is going to be and how it will be enforced. That's what white supremacy means. And then you go to the sixth area of activity, politics. We will decide what kind of titles they will have and how many. I mean, you know, we'll even let them walk around and be kings and queens. I mean, that's all right. They love titles. We'll dump titles on them like you wouldn't believe. Judges, kings, queens, school deans, college presidents. Oh, yeah. And they'll just, pour it on them. But give them absolutely no power to do nothing.
Okay.
But they'll have 15 titles. You have 15 titles to one Negro, and he'll go crazy.
Okay.
That's mind control.
Mind control. Thank you, Swad. Don't be a stranger here. We got to take this break here. You are now listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. And we thank you for listening to the show. We have about a half an hour to go, exactly 29 minutes, but we want to get as many phone calls that we can get in. And when you do make the phone call, be sure to call this number, 516-453-9921, and press the number 1 button, and you will get in line. George from the Bronx at 646. We did have you in here, but you're not on the screen, but you call back, and I'll have them expedite you to the top. You can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, @gmail.com, and I will get your Gmails and read it at another time. Chat room is now open, and there's been some beautiful conversation in the chat room. Purdue 21. I know you wanted to ask Mr. Fuller to give examples of what Universal Man and Universal Woman would do in all 9 areas of activity. We'll try to get to that question, but every once in a while we will try to get that. And by the way, if anybody has seen or know the whereabouts of the Extermination Man, the man they used to call into when Mr. Fuller and myself were on TalkTainMenRadio.com, he would call in and give his VGQ on what was going on. A lot of people have been asking about him. I know he's from Chicago, but that's all I know. But if anybody in the Chi-Town area knows of him or what his real name is, tell him to give the show a call. People want to hear from him and hear what's been going on in his life. Okay, so let's get with the last half hour. Don't forget, George from the Bronx. If you have a call, or rather, we got you back in, and we want you to call so we can expedite you right up to the front of the line here, and then we'll get you going. Okay, here, Marcus, hold on. We got a Gmail from Gary. He says this, Mr. Fuller. I guess something big is happening in the district today. I guess it is. I don't know. But anyway, he says, Mr. Fuller, what do you think of President Biden hosting the Floyd family at the White House?
Well, it's something he did, and so if that's the Floyd, George Floyd family?
Yes.
Well, it depends on what they think about it. And I think about it, whatever, if they think that it's something that may be of constructive value, what the code says is that what will be the constructive result? Here again, everything about counter-racist science, counter-racist codification is about constructive results. So now if you ask me what I think about it based on the code, which is how I'm supposed to respond, it depends on what the constructive result is. That's all.
Okay.
If it produces a constructive result. But now, other than that, I'm not supposed to have any thoughts about it, except what's the constructive result.
Okay. All righty. There you go,
right
Mr.
now,
Jones.
I don't know.
Okay. This right here, Produce 21 wanted to know, Mr. Fuller, asked Mr. Fuller to please give an example of what universal men and universal women do in all 9 areas of people activity.
Well, I have some notes here because I'm not looking at it. It's in the textbook for victims, the revised expanded edition. But first of all, it says you do not knowingly say anything that's not true. If you're going to be a universal man or a universal woman, you do not knowingly ever say anything that's not true. Now, it doesn't say that you will go about disseminating information in a way that's harmful to someone unjustly, but you definitely don't say anything at any time knowingly that's not true. In fact, even knowingly or unknowingly, if you're going to be a universal man, a universal woman, because you say one thing that's not true, and boy, you have disqualified yourself for that title. I mean, that's serious. Why? Because the white supremacist systems and all evil systems thrive on what? Telling lies, saying things that are not true. Every evil system has ever been thought of. You deceive people. You use deception. You say things that are not true.
Yes.
So truth is extremely important. Truth plus justice plus correctness equals what? This mythical thing called peace, which has never existed among the people of the known universe. We've never had peace, all right? And one of the main reasons is we've never had a situation where everybody told the truth in such a manner that it produced constructive results. So you do not knowingly say anything that is not true. And then the next thing, you speak and act to oppose racism in all areas of activity. You have to do that if you're going to be a universal man, a universal woman, and or you're seeking to be one. You speak and act to support all constructive activity and to oppose all mistreatment and all non-correct interaction between people, creatures, and things. You eat and sleep correctly and only as necessary.
Yes.
It's a number of things.
Yes.
In fact, everything that, in synopsis, in order to kind of wrap it up, every move that you make has a constructive result. That's how you know whether you're on the correct track of being a universal man or a universal woman.
Okay.
You don't do anything or say anything in such a manner that the result that is produced is non-constructive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fuller. I agree with Carl Nelson. It's like I'm in class myself. He always speaks of this as when you
That's
speak
going to be
about
a long list.
Yeah.
A universal man, universal woman.
Yes, sir.
In every area of activity.
Mm-hmm.
No, everything that you do is going to produce a constructive result at all times.
At all times, yes, sir.
At any time you drop that ball, you no longer qualify for being a universal man.
All it takes is one
or
time.
A universal woman.
Mm-hmm.
So you make sure you know what you're doing.
Yes, sir. Before we move on, since I made mention of his name, have you been informed when the next time that you will be on the Carl Nelson Show?
I do not know at this time. Mr. Nelson will let me know according to his time. That's
okay.
WOL Radio, Dr. Kathy Hughes radio stations, one of her infant stations.
Yes.
I think she used to. if I'm not correct, I think she used to call that her baby station. That's the one she started with.
Yes.
And that's why she keeps it on. And,
WOL.
Yes, WOL radio. And I haven't been told when I will be on that station.
Okay.
And I appreciate being on that station when I am.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah, I'll make sure I tune in to catch what you have to say. Before we go to Mark, we're going to get to you out in the 562. This is from South Africa. Brother Lungizi says this. He says, first of all, he hopes that you're well. He says this, Mr. Fuller. What should a victim of racism say / do when a suspected white supremacist says that what they should worry about is class and not race? Thank you, Mr. Fuller, and enjoy the rest of your day. Mr. Linguisi from South Africa.
Oh, when you talk to white people, you talk to white people about what white people want to talk about. Otherwise, they're not going to talk to you anyway, and it's going to be it's going to be a very hostile exchange of views. So, just like a prisoner of war talking to the commandant of a prison, that's the way you should look at yourself if you're a person classified as non-white and you're talking to anybody white, you will defer, because you have to that white person, because that white person may be associated with being a white supremacist, or at least that white person is classified as white and is in the system of white supremacy classified as white, which means a very powerful position, and you're in a weak position. So therefore, you want to find out what is it that the white person wants to talk about. And
the 4
according to the code, once you find out what the white person wants to talk about, the code requires you, to the best of your ability, stay in the question lane.
Mm-hmm.
So you just simply start off with the question, sir, ma'am, what do you want to talk to me about?
Okay.
And why do you want to talk to me about what you want to talk to me about it?
Page 171.
Yes, right. And then the third question is, how do you plan to talk to me? In other words, where are we going to meet? Are we going to meet in an open forum, or it's going to be a one-on-one, nobody else around, or it's going to be confidential? If somebody else is around and whatnot, it's just between me and you and nobody else. And then the last question, and it might be the last of many, the last of the first of 2,000 questions, but you've got to get those first 4 in, and that is, what do you expect the constructive result to be, sir or ma'am, after we get through conversing with each other? What is your goal for talking to me and you saying to yourself as a prisoner of war? Because, see, white people don't even have to talk to black people except tell them what to do in the system of white supremacy. I mean, white people are not obligated to say not one word, not good morning, not nothing, to no black person on the planet if they don't want to in the system of white supremacy. So when a white person says, hey, buddy, I want to talk to you, you should want to know why. You're a prisoner of war. And most likely you're talking to a prison master. So you want to know why they want to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
Because they don't have to ask you for nothing.
Yes, sir. Okay. All righty, here we go. Let's go out to L.A. And Marcus, we got you in, sir. Good morning, and what is your question for Mr. Fuller?
Good morning, Mr. Bobby. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. I'm still
Good morning, sir.
The question that I had this morning was in regards to when I first called earlier in the morning. I think I called a little bit late, but some talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and how we had the Black Wall Street, basically just bombed on us. And I was reading this book called The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Mersha Baradaran. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right. But she goes on and proceeds to talk about how we had another financial empire, or quote-unquote empire, around that same time in Durham, North Carolina. In Durham, North Carolina, she says, escaped the same calamities that Black Wall Street. And what she's referring to by that is she was saying that Durham, North Carolina was kind of careful on building their business sector because they didn't have any buildings that were as tall as the white building places, and things that didn't attract other things rather than white clientele. So she's saying about Black Wall Street, how the buildings were a lot taller, a lot of more I guess you would call it like show-off attractions were being showcased over at the Black Wall Street, showing us how good we are, how good our business has been going since it started. And then Black Wall Street gets taken down from us. And then I started listening to the show about how Mr. Fuller talks about showing off, and then I kind of related that to what she was talking about in this book. So my question is, in this sense, could showing off also be a threat to the system of white supremacy, given how, if it is true that some of these buildings and things that were going on in Black Wall Street were show-off tactics, and that could be part of the reason why the white supremacists felt the way that they did and, took it from us. So could showing off be a threat to white supremacy in some senses?
Black people showing off be a threat to white supremacists? No.
Yes.
The white supremacists don't mind black people showing off to each other. Mm-hmm. As their goal. But now, if they're a threat to white supremacy, it means they might be getting some power of getting out from under white supremacy. Mm-hmm. Now, that goes beyond showing off. So the white supremacists always alert to that. See, in other words, you can do anything you want to if you're a prisoner of war in the prison. But if it looks like you are doing something that may wind up that you erode the walls of the prison so that the prison is no longer a prison, then the white supremacists immediately take note of that. In other words, the prisoners can mill around, they can fight among themselves, they can be joyous among themselves, they can have hallelujah and jamboree time and play banjos among themselves, and like Red was doing, getting ready to do in the movie Shawshank Redemption, he can play his little harmonica. I mean, hey, you black people, I mean, you can have your harmonica. I mean, we don't mind that. Or you can have this, you can have that. You can have your little fraudulent operations going, or legitimate businesses, if we allow you to do that. But don't do anything that looks like you're going to be eliminating this prison. We're in the prison business. If you're a white supremacist, you're in the world prison business. You have made prisoners of war of the non-white people of the entire planet. So if they start acting like they're not going to no longer be prisoners of war, that's serious. Mm. And so we'll just knock that little operation over, because it doesn't take anything but just a flick of the finger. See, the white supremacists will knock over anything that black people build under the system of white supremacy. I don't care. Right. I don't care how, we got this now. We're no longer subject to it. As long as you're subject to the system of white supremacy, anything that you think you got, they can take it in 5 minutes or less.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more question?
If it's a quick question, please, sir.
Yeah, it is. It's one sentence. Under the system of white supremacy, is there a such thing as anti-white racism? I heard this from a state representative. I don't know which state she's from, but she got on the internet and talking about how we need to start condemning all anti-white racism. And I was confused by that statement. So is there a such thing as anti-white racism under the current system that we have?
In the system of white supremacy, what? According to the code, the white supremacists thrive on confusion. So they use terms all the time that will confuse people. So how do you get rid of confusion? Questions and answers.
Questions and answers.
So the person who uses the term asks the person what the term means. And
yes, sir.
And sometimes they'll give you a lot of words that's not really an answer. So that means what? You have another question, and then another question, and then another question. Until what? Until you get the truth.
Okay.
See, this is something, and I want to really call attention to this. The white supremacists are greatly skilled that when you ask them a question, they'll give you a bunch of words that sound like an answer. But when you walk away, you're more confused than you were before you asked the question. But you think that you got an answer. But a lot of black people have discovered, I discovered it. I said, you know what? He said a lot, but he didn't answer my question. I got to go back and start all over again. They're real shrewd at doing that. They'll say, well, let me explain it to you in childlike terms. Maybe you'll understand. And then they'll talk to you for half an hour or maybe for 15 minutes. And when you walk away, you'll notice, wait a minute, it sounded like he answered my question and did it very well. But did he really answer my question? Well, it seems like he did. But wait a minute. Am I crazy? I haven't got an answer to my question. And you look around and they have disappeared. They are good at that. They are good at that. They are the masters. They are magicians when it comes to that. You ask them a question, and boy, they'll give you some words, and everybody will applaud. You look around, all the other black people are applauding and looking at each other and say, boy, that's genius, when the person didn't answer the question at all. But they sounded like they did. Watch for that.
All right. Thank you very much, Marcus, and don't be a stranger. Let's see here. Chicago, 1919. Detroit, 1943. New York, 1863. Philadelphia, 1985. Washington, D.C., 1898. Charleston, 2015. Eufaula, Alabama, 1874. Camellia, Georgia, 1868. Rosewood, Florida, 1923. Elaine, Oklahoma, 1919. Tulsa, 1921. Vicksburg, Mississippi, 1874. Clinton, Mississippi, 1875. These are just a few of the many towns, and there are many others, that had black massacres in them, most of them not even mentioned in the history books about black people being massacred. I'm looking at the site now. I just named a few of them. Maybe you know some. If you do, hit me up so that I can become aware of them. Mr. Fuller, we have about 6 minutes of the show left, of which 4 minutes is going to be dedicated to this wonderful book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept. Mr. Fuller, please speak to your book.
Yes, I sometimes refer to my book as one of the best of the worst written counter-racist code books ever. But I did my best. And you can get it by going to producejustice.com. and it's a textbook workbook for victims of the system of white supremacy. And it's a textbook workbook that not only talks about what the problem is, we got millions of books that talk about what the problem is. And we got other millions of books talking about how we have reacted to it, how we feel about it, all kinds of psychological analysis. And these books are important. But we have so very few, if any, books that tell what an individual person can do each and every day, wherever he or she happens to be. And that's what I've tried to do with the Counter-Racist Code. Because, and I call it a code book, because the white supremacists have a code. The white supremacists, by the time they're around, I've estimated, around 15 years old, the average white person knows the white code without anybody calling it a white code, because it's built in to everything that you see white people doing collectively throughout the entire planet. They're not just walking around bumping into things. They have a very codified way of going about doing everything, and a very codified way of how they interact with the non-white people of this planet. And that's why you have a system called the system of white supremacy. It's a world government, and it's codified. Why? Because everything that works consistently has a code. And so I'm attempting to write the first few pages of what one day, I guess, somebody, or the black people put together, will come up with a complete code, because there's no such thing as a complete code until all problems are solved, and black people haven't even attempted to have a counter-racist code. A code meaning what? Do's and don'ts. Every time you do it, it works. Every time you say it, it works. Because that's what a code is. It works every time. You don't have to do any second thoughts about it, because you know it's going to work. There's a lot of things, millions of things, that black people keep doing that don't work. And the white supremacists probably look at us in amazement. But we call it our traditions and all like that. But of a lot of our traditions become traditions. How? Just by doing stuff over and over again. That's how it becomes a tradition. Traditions are not nothing to establish. You look at your traditions, including like the food that you eat. They say this is traditional black food. Well, traditional black food was what black people ate on those slave ships, too. That was a tradition for a very long time, because slave ships lasted for a very long time. But you're going to worship that type of tradition? Eating food, so-called food, with flies in it, and feces swimming around in it, and that's what you're eating? And you make it a tradition? And you eat the type of animals that are not really nourishing, or maybe eating any animal at all. May turn out not to be nourishing, who knows, in the true sense. It may not produce a constructive result. See, and that's just one example. But I'm talking about codes. So I'm trying to write a textbook about everything that black people do, don't do, say and don't say, that will work to produce a constructive result. And that will eliminate the system of white supremacy. And that's the way to go. Do's and don'ts. And a code for doing the do's and don'ts. You can get by going to producejustice.com.
Okay. Well,
I
our time
refer to it as the greatest occupation.
Okay, well, our time is gone, so we hope that we'll do better the next time. Thank you for listening, for everybody. Woo! Man, it went fast. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Thanks for all the calls. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
And I thank you.